bright future. Every student matters.
Hello everyone. So let's start our next topic here, that is rise of mass production and consumption. Now students, before this we were talking about the First World War and the post-war recovery in context of Britain, right? Now moving on again from that angle, here we are going to understand a new criteria or new scenario that was happening in the 19th century, somewhere 19th-20th century. So this is the rise of mass production and consumption. Now what do you understand by mass production here? Mass production, it means, if we say in simple terms, efficient production of goods, of similar goods, let's say, in large number. So as you can see, as the name suggests here, mass production, what does it meaning? So producing something in large number. So here we are talking about this something is similar goods that are being produced in large numbers. So what is happening? What was happening earlier? We talked about the industries, how they were rising, fluctuating, how the economy was declining, and again it was stabilizing. We were seeing these changes throughout before the First World War and after that. Now after the First World War, all these countries, they were trying to recover from the war, right? They were trying to stabilize their economy. And meanwhile, here we are talking about United States. Here in 1920s, one of the most important feature was mass production. Now what is this mass production again? So here we are talking about the efficient production of similar goods in large quantities in any particular industry, right? So again, like I told you, a marked feature in the United States. Now who was the main pioneer or the first person who began doing this mass production here? So it was Henry Ford. Now have you heard his name, students? No. If you see, Henry Ford was car manufacturer or owner of this great car brand, that was the Ford, right? The Ford car brand, he was the owner. So Henry Ford, he was a well-known pioneer of mass production in car industry or the car plant that he had established. Now here we see that he adopted the assembly line method. Now when we are talking about mass production, students, it means that we need machines, right? We need something that is quite efficiently producing these goods, the goods that we are talking about. In this case, we are talking about cars or all the materials, implements required in car, right? So here we are seeing that Henry Ford, he adopted the assembly line method. Now what do we understand by this assembly line method? So in assembly line method, workers had to repeat a single task like fitting a part of the car at a pace dictated by the conveyor belt. Let us have a look at the image here in order to understand the assembly line method. Now what are we seeing in this assembly line method? There is a conveyor belt. Can you see the conveyor belt, students? Now this is the manufacturing of a car taking place here in the car plant established by Henry Ford. Since he had used this idea of assembly line method, so it's best to understand through that. Now what is happening here? A single task is being completed or is being done repeatedly. For example, here what do we see? We see that a part of car is being fixed by the worker here. Now this worker is also doing the same task. Now they had to work according to the pace of conveyor belt. How did this happen? So all these workers, they had to stand in line in front of the conveyor belt. And as these parts of the car it passed on, they had to do a single task. The task was to attach the part of that particular car that was being manufactured. Quite simple to understand. Now, in today's date, when you will go to these industries, technology has advanced. But today, people definitely use this assembly line method. Now, why is this assembly line method used, student? So, it increased the output per worker by speeding up the pace of work. So, the main idea was to increase the output of workers. And that's why assembly line method was being used here, right? And how did this happen? It happened by speeding up the pace of the work, and it was dictated by the conveyor belt here. Now, Henry Ford's T-model Ford, the car that he manufactured, was the world's first mass-produced car. So, it was the first car that was mass-produced. Okay? Here we see that unable to cope up with the stress of working on assembly lines, the workers, they quit in large numbers. So basically what was happening? These workers, they were not getting breaks. They had to continuously stand and work at a certain speed dictated by the conveyor belt. And also they had to cope up with this new style of working. Therefore, many workers, they decided to leave the job. And as a result of it, what happened? Henry Ford decided to double up their wages. And this is how he started to get all these people again. So by 1914, he doubled up the wages and these people, they again came to work. So Henry Ford recovered the high wage by increasing the production line and making workers work harder. Now he is paying double to these workers. So how is he going to balance it? So he recovered the high wages that he was paying by increasing the production line. So basically the production line was increased. Why? Because all these workers, they were given double wages, double their original wages, right? So this is the T model Ford that was manufactured by Henry Ford. Now can you see the conveyor belt system or the assembly line system that was used in this car plant by Henry Ford? Apart from this, what are we seeing? That car production in the United States, it rose from 2 million to 5 million. So in 10 years, we see that 3 million, there was a rise of 3 million in the car production. Apart from this, apart from car production area, housing and consuming boom of 1920s, it also created the foundation of prosperity in the United States. So what are we seeing here? We see a stabilized economy in the United States right after the First World War. Now the US resumed exporting capital to the rest of the world in 1923. So after the First World War, what are we seeing? That all the countries that were in debt, they were now asking loans from the United States. And the United States, it turned into international creditor instead of being an international debtor, right? So it boosted European recovery and the world trade as well. Now here we see that as these countries, they were getting loans, now all these European nations, they were recovering soon. And it was also helping in the world trade. So you have to remember this point here, that how the scenario was changing after the First World War. Now coming to the exercise section here, students, in very short answer questions, we have a question. Name the pointer of mass production of cars. Now what are you going to write in this question? What is the answer that you have to write here? Yes, you have read it right now. The answer is quite simple, students. Henry Ford. Okay.